This is Michael from Nomadic Insights. Welcome to our Sunday talk show here on the stream called Skeptic Sunday. It is a pleasure that you are joining us. I'm still waiting for the stream to effectively get booted up here, but here we go. So today's topic is going to be one of my personal favorites from an investing perspective, my buddy Elon Musk. Elon is just a lot. I mean, he is just a lot. It's one of those things where, with what he gets into, I am continually impressed. But we'll dive into that a little bit more now. So let's get started with this stream. So to open things up on today's Skeptic Sunday, I'm going to be reacting to a video by Lawai86 called Dear Elon, Please Shut Up. I think that really sums up most people's feelings sometimes on Elon Musk, unless you are a true dyed-in-blue muskrat. For those of you unfamiliar with the term muskrat, that is the term used to describe Elon Musk fanboys. I think there are a number of problems with a lot of the technology solutions that Elon is proposing, but hey, we'll get into that a little bit more. So let's just get this pulled up. Hey, thanks for joining the live stream over on Twitch. So let's get started with our good buddy Elon here. So for those of you not familiar with his work, Lawai86 is a China YouTuber, used to live in China for, I believe, like nearly 15 years. He hasn't lived there in like 3 or 4 years, so some of his information is pretty dated. I do call him and his buddy the green screen grifters. It's just when you're looking for first party information on China. I found a lot of their stuff useful because you can literally just, as these guys are motorcycling around China, you can see the huge number of. I know he is just a total hero, right? Oh. So, I mean, I do just kind of call them the green screen grifters. At this point, I think that one of the duo, Winston, I can never remember Winston's last, Winston Sturzel. Winston Sturzel, yeah, that's the guy. Winston Sturzel is the one Sturzel, right? Yeah, I think that's right. So the main thing is, the main thing with these guys is their information tends to be a bit outdated. But again, with our buddies, the green screen grifters, there's always a grain of truth, even in. I know, but I just kind of think it's like the lovely hero. But this was definitely coming. It's really hard to get away from the green screen guys towards a certain extent. I think everybody here does appreciate a little bit of the green screen bashing. This was kind of like this was like back in the days, guys. I haven't talked about these guys in like a year. Whew. They're an interesting duo. I I really liked their original content. I think the stuff they were doing pre-move to the US was really fantastic from a content creation perspective. The live motorcycle show, that was really cool. It was just a cool concept of a show going around China on motorcycles. I thought that was a really cool show. Personally, I just don't see a lot of the value anymore. And I think that's really got a lot to do with either Matt or Winston kind of having health issues. So they've kind of started creating this easy cash out content which is my main thing with these guys. I mean, I'm not avidly against them. I do think they raise valid points about the CCP, and like I did in my I did a Thursday night live stream on this, where I'm going to hop into this a little bit more. The sanctions that the United States government just passed, literally restricting chip imports on more advanced chipsets based on the wafer size. That puts us in a state of Cold War with China, whether or not we like it. So we're already, based on the actions of the US government, we're here. Like, we are in an active state of Cold War. And I think that their content really does require a sober perspective, or like a nice healthy dose of skepticism. Because personally, I was born in 93, after the start of the Cold War. I'm not really wild about the idea of there being a Cold War between the two major global powers, China and the United States. I think that bears a lot of skepticism. I'm not going in with the wool over my eyes, but I just think I just think that there's something to bear in mind there. But the problem is, it's really hard to be like a China hawk and kind of, be a bit more moderate. Or, like, I definitely would say I'm a China skeptic. I'm also skeptical of the United States government's policies, mostly because I've just spent so much time outside of the United States. You do developed. Well, I have a lot of things. I have a lot of things against that personally. Namely, I'd like to not have my kids go to school and hide under the desk if I ever do have any. If that's kind of the world we're bringing them into, I'm not really interested in that. That just sounds like a terrible, terrible idea. So let's see here. Oh, did I just boost the lawn size here? So
please sit down. I promise you that this video will be fair and based in fact and reality. And actually, I don't even do videos about people. I don't do that because I feel like people get too much attention and there's too much pettiness around the internet. Dedicated videos to one person seem petty, they are petty, and the world has just got enough pettiness to go around for all to enjoy. So that's not what I'm doing here. But the problem is, this is different. This is just at a new level of absurdity, to the point where I have to make a video about a person, because if we don't do something about this, I'm afraid that the wrong people are going to get influenced.
I can't believe I'm about to agree with that. Oh, man. This is bittersweet, guys. This is bittersweet. You guys make videos about people all the time. True. The reason I haven't picked up Mandarin is largely it's just time investment. It's like 2,000 hours I just do not have. And my interest and ability to really go to China, it's an economic language. It's just not there anymore because of, kind of the de facto Cold War we see. So now let's continue with what Matt's gonna say.
The fact and reality of the matter is that Elon Musk needs to shut the f up.
You ever been complimented on your wallet?
Yeah, probably.
These guys have the weirdest sponsors. I'm still not over their NordVPN spot. Their NordVPN spot. That really still annoyed me because of how bad NordVPN. So, but can we just take a second here? Can we just take a second here of the sponsors? I'm just See, that's the beauty of being a skeptic. It's not incumbent to be, it's not incumbent, it's not really incumbent on us to be the people who need to be, who need to be experts. These guys hold themselves out to be China experts, and I do think it goes into a lot where, there's some legitimate points to be raised. But guys, do you want to have a wallet? Let's continue. I do watch fully through the sponsors out of respect for these guys when I react, but let's
Probably not,
continue.
right? Can't say the same for my favorite wallet in the world and today's sponsor, Extra Wallets. Extra Wallets are the sleekest, least bulky, most awesome, cool wallets you'll ever see in your life. Put your cards in, push the button, they fan out. It's awesome.
I feel like this
Gone are the
breaks a
days
lot.
of walking around with a big bulging mass in your pants. This time, when you whip it
Time
out, it's sleek, it's
for-
slender,
for
it's
the button.
stylish. I absolutely
It's
love
time for
the
the
high quality
button.
materials
I-
used in making the wallets. It's my
I
favorite
just don't
wallet
know
in
what
the
to
entire
say here.
world. If you go to shop.extra.com/lawai86, not only are you going to get a massive discount off of the entire site just by using that link, but during this fall sale, when you're at checkout, make sure you use the code LAWAI86 and you're actually going to get up to 25%
This
off
just
as well.
seems
So it's a
like
fantastic
something
deal,
that is
and
going to
you're be
break
supporting
all
the
the
channel.
time.
Thanks.
Elon Musk needs to shut
Just-
the fuck up. And not just for
okay.
this poor robot.
The
that looks
robot
like a
is
prototype
terrible.
From the 90s. Not even the dude that dressed up in a suit that posed as Tesla's new robot. No, not even that. We're not talking about that. Bro, by the way, Honda did this in the 90s. Like, what are you doing? Honda's robot looks like it could actually match human potential, and your prototype robot that just came out in 2022 looks like the humans are gonna have to be the one aiding it. Let's not burden people with stuff that already exists.
I mean, it's like this guy Thunderfoot has some great videos. Like, there's Cosmic Skeptic who has just got videos lampooning, just totally lampooning Musk, and it's just a joy to behold. It is a joy to behold. Now, I do think that's funny. I kind of just use Apple Pay for everything. The biggest issue with wallets is, since most Americans still drive, I generally will still have a wallet on me for like my ID, because you need to have your driver's license when you drive, depending on the state. I know in like New York now, you have like 24 hours to like send a picture to your license to the police, I think, but it's mostly driver's license, so hence everything targeted at people in the States tends to be like wallet heavy. But I basically, if you've been watching my credit card stuff, like, I'm not sure, because I'm kind of like, okay, I know my audience tends to prefer, oh yeah, it's a total trap. I mean, I don't know. I mean, the biggest thing right now is, the battery tech and solar panels. Like, China does currently have most of the rare earths, but they get most of the toxins. I'm still not sure how this whole electric car thing is gonna work. My day job is market research, and like everybody's doing electric cars now except Toyota. And I'm just kind of going like, what? Like, how are you gonna get, how are you gonna get this, man? Like, how's it gonna work? So I take it Matt is not a Tesla guy. These guys like their internal combustion engines and they like fixing up cars. So I think they owned like a motorcycle shop company. So I do think that Matt here, note sarcasm, is out for their internal combustion engines. But let's see. I just think he doesn't like that Elon is making super expensive cars that nobody can work on or fix themselves and are basically like big bricks.
It's all right. No, anyway, this is about someone getting so self-important that they think they can come to the rescue and stop millions of deaths, save millions of dollars, and solve global crisis. You got to brace yourself for this one, guys. Elon
Bracing
Musk
myself. I'm
told
ready.
the Financial Times, and I quote, "My recommendation would be to figure out a special administrative zone for Taiwan that is reasonably palatable. Probably won't make everyone happy. And it's possible, I think probably in fact, that they could have an arrangement that's more lenient than
They
Hong
do.
Kong." Guys, this is so delusional that I actually had to read it 10 times to figure out if it was real.
Okay, so the thing is with Taiwan, so like just on like the global flashpoints, no, not really. They're just two dudes, man. I mean, they're just two dudes with a camera. That effectively is what, that is effectively what, oh my God, yeah, Musk is a bonehead. I have long resisted my urge to go after Musk, but there's like this other guy, like there are so many scams and people just really want to believe this stuff. I'm just like, I am blown away. Like, hypnotize yourself to make $250,000 a week. Bogus. So friggin' bupkis. So friggin' bupkis. But, with the Financial Times, there needs to be Washington. Okay, let's remember our favorite Winston Churchill quote on this channel, which was absolutely prophetic. You can always rely. I might just be making this up here, full disclosure. I just think it's a perfect quote to describe how Americans do things. You can rely upon the Americans to do the right thing after doing everything else. That is our country's motto. Like, let's do electric vehicles, which are totally unsustainable, and we don't have the infrastructure, as literally California is like caught by wildfires and burning to the ground. Like, that is totally gonna work with our power grid. That is like a great solution right there, because instead of actually accepting the fact that we have to build sustainable urban transportation, let's double down on cars, guys. Let's double the heck down. That is America in a nutshell. And, with Taiwan, the biggest issue right now from a geopolitical perspective is the critical nature of Taiwan to the global semiconductor industry. So, from a strategic perspective, the United States is incredibly dependent on Taiwan for its chip supply. If you look at the import bans, Taiwan has been slipping more technology to China, has been doing fab manufacturing in mainland China, to kind of have this detente, and it's gonna be, I do think that the Biden administration has kind of pivoted the realpolitik. With the transatlantic trade partnership being dismantled by Trump, a lot of the like, let's pin in China, let's be more hawkish on Russia. This realpolitik, that's kind of dominated. If you look at the most of the American political establishment is usually dominated by the Council on Foreign Relations. So, now Washington is kind of embracing, what the actual professional diplomatic corps thinks. And, oh, dude, Americans are stubborn. They are like, but so are Spanish people. It's like, if you watch like the videos of Spain during the pandemic where they're just like they're just walking and they're just like talking to cops, like, I'm not doing anything, man. So are Italians. But I I agree with the made in Taiwan was made in China, but the big issue from a geopolitical perspective is, it, China containment rests on us securing Taiwan. So the United States is not going to back down over Taiwan. Now, Taiwan becomes geopolitically expedient to the US government once we've re-onshored most of the chip industry, which the Biden administration has taken a lot of movements towards. So, we're in a period most definitely of deglobalization. Just looking at supply chains and supply chain shocks, China has really walled itself off through the one COVID policy. I do think the Chinese government is mistaken in, de-engaging and kind of going after foreigners with this. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. There are a number of, stupid things the Western world has done, such as the United Kingdom and Brexit. Those chickens are now coming home to roost, where the UK is heading into a massive recession. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I would say it seems likely that, like most of the things I was predicting last year, or I was being like really skeptical about, I'm like, yeah, this is how it's going to play out. But I do think the China alarmism is a bit, is a bit of a problem. I still think like the China bond people, my number one Medium article ever is the China bond scam. Did take that video down, unfortunately. It's quite sad. As I've tried to weigh into the content, but what we're going to see in the chip industry is there's going to be increased import restrictions, shutting China out of more advanced AI and computing power. There's just a more sober, I do think it's fair to say about China. China is not necessarily the United States' enemy at the moment, but they're definitely not our friend. And we've had kind of this friend relationship with them for the past like 15 years, where it's gonna be a bit of an implosion. The problem with what's going on in the UK right now is the UK's institutions are not that independent. And, given the situation with Russia, it's the energy prices, union issues, the fact that the UK is losing population. There's just a lot of macroeconomic trends inside of the United Kingdom that causes an issue. There's a lot of thought on navies at the moment, where in the next 40 years, essentially what's going to happen is, less reliance on, less reliance on foreign media. I would say one of the big things that has happened is, if you look at the United States, if you look at the United States, if you look at just movement in general in the Navy, with the invention of the Space Force by Trump, I still think that was kind of comical. So it's one of those things that I just think is kind of funny, where air power predominates, and it's one of those things where a lot of the air power that's the main thing for the United States, is projection of air power. Naval power, where it's just like, that's going to continue to diminish, where it's like more rockets and projectiles. where that's more related to power projection, uh, from a military perspective, that are special operations. So let us continue here.
Real or not. I didn't know if it was a trick or if it was someone just misquoting. I didn't know if it was fake news. And I realized, hey, this is coming from the Financial Times. This is real. Should we call him Elon Musk? Maybe Elon Ma?
Hi, everyone. I'm Elon Musk.
Nah, that guy already exists. I'm gonna call him Elon Musk because
Okay.
this is some prime shill behavior for the Chinese government. Elon said that, in more or less words, the free nation and the proud nation of Taiwan, a nation so free, in fact, that it makes many Western democracies green with envy, to bend the knee to a maniacal.
Okay, so Taiwan thinks it's China. This is one of those things where I get in trouble for this. I get in trouble for this all the time. I have made quite the reputation for myself, I think, in the little small China YouTube community where I'm just in here going, hey, hold on a second here. These are two political parties at opposite ends of a civil war. Like, Taiwan has not declared independence, and it has not said it is an independent country. Taiwan claims all of mainland China. I mean, it's like I'm not trying to be politically, it's a lot more complicated than that. Unless I really miss something in the past like 3 years. But even Taiwan tried to insist upon a one China policy, the same as the CCP did. So the Kuomintang and I mean they could try to liberate Beijing. I mean they really could, but I mean they still maintain. Well, interestingly enough, like Taiwan also claims the territory of Mongolia still. Fun facts. So this is a complicated political issue. Taiwan is China. I mean, that's kind of a logical fallacy. Like, how could something that claims to be China engage in hostility against China, where it is essentially itself? I mean, in Taiwan rejoining the CCP, under KMT leadership, where if you actually look in China, everybody's like, oh, CCP, CCP. There is actually the Revolutionary Party of the KMT, which is part of the United Front government in China, where the Kuomintang are actually part of the governing structure of China under the leadership of the CCP. Yeah, it's an old-fashioned civil war, and I just generally think from an American perspective, like, I think the Chinese Civil War kind of needed to resolve itself. Just interfering in with what both sides agree is a domestic Chinese matter seems like a bad idea, but the lobbyists tend to disagree. Yeah, I mean the KMT itself it's a bit baffling, but kind of let's get back to our buddy Old Elon.
Dictatorship that wants to take it over for malicious and evil purposes. He's basically telling Taiwan to suck it up and find a way to join China under Communist Party rule. Now, in case you've been out of the loop, let me catch you up on something super quick. Here's a really simple, easy to understand crash course on why the China-Taiwan conflict is probably the biggest thing boiling over in the background that will ever happen in our lifetimes. And also why that.
So I do just kind of want to just break here for a second from what Matt is saying, where the China-Taiwan conflict, when we're looking at that, is, it's been going on for 50 years. I mean, most of these conflicts are like decades in the making. I mean, it is, I would argue that Pakistan-India conflict is probably much more severe and much more worrying, considering that they've gone to war a lot more frequently, where China-India conflict is what I would worry about more. I think Taiwan is just going to be both sides kicking the can for a very long time, especially after the debacle that China has seen Russia go through. That really changed the circumstances. So with that in mind, I just don't see how you're going to get to a point where this makes a great deal of sense to, let's go to war with China, or, it would be better to be a quote, de jure I am neutral on India-Pakistan. I'm not getting involved there. That is a good way. I do not have enough information about the India-Pakistan conflict, but it is definitely, I would say, a lot more concerning, since there is both sides have nuclear weapons, given the population. That would definitely rank as a lot more concerning than China-Taiwan. China and Taiwan, there's less likelihood of, I think, a China-Taiwan conflict going nuclear than there is an India-Pakistan conflict going nuclear. So the risk levels are a lot higher. So I don't agree with this assessment that somehow it's going to turn into a China. I'm just going to agree. Again, with aggression from both countries. Okay, I'm going to put on my geography hat for a second. My only comment on this will be the India-Pakistan border was really terribly drawn because there's no natural frontier between either. East and West Pakistan with Bangladesh. It was not a good idea. It was just not a good idea at all. From where those lines were drawn, and that's generally the chief criticism I've seen of it. There is a lot of, because it's just, I'm going to agree to disagree. I would say that, though, the biggest issue with it is there's the border, and it's one of those things where our going to go theoretical because I'm going to be like, oh, geography. I do think geographic determinism, does play a large part in a lot of these conflicts where they're, while ideology is very important, there's a lot of resource issues that also do play a part as well in these conflicts. But let's get back to but let's get back to that. I mean, I'm just I just don't have a position. I don't have a position, sir. I don't know enough about um India Pak. I'm saying that incorrectly. It would be the Indo-Pakistani War, I think. Be the correct way to say it. But let's just continue here.
Horrible quote from Elon is just so bad. Here's the deal. China had a civil war. It was with the communists, led by Mao Zedong, Chairman Mao, versus the KMT, or the Kuomintang, and that was run by Chiang Kai-shek. The KMT lost, and the communists won.
Okay.
A lot of reasons that happened, but basically, to make it quick, the KMT ran away to Taiwan, which was not under Chinese communist control. They chilled there, and they eventually liberalized into a full-on democracy. Now, you can see why China would get super pissed off, because in the process of Taiwan becoming a wealthy democracy, it surpassed China in almost every metric of life. That's what happens when you allow your citizens the freedom to own business, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of movement, all of these things. And Taiwan is now twice as rich as China per capita. It has its own currency, its own government, its own military, its own judicial system, and it ranks at the very pinnacle of the world.
Again, geographic determinism, generally small mountainous countries, at least in Europe, tend to do pretty well. Like Switzerland, for example. So basically, that's the geography of Taiwan. It's like the Switzerland of the Pacific. From a geographic perspective, interestingly, was originally settled by the Dutch before, or is it the Portuguese? I can never remember. I'm pretty sure it was the Dutch. But a lot of this liberalization or these liberal policies, again, if you look at Singapore, same story here. And well, you can become a stock speculator according to George Soros, because apparently we are living in yet another golden age of capitalism, with being speculation. So China is basically, Taiwan liberalized after it became wealthy. So I think this is a disingenuous point of view. And, even political power today in South Korea, Taiwan, it is controlled by a fairly small political elite of families. It's not as... So, it is free, but it became free after it got rich. There tends to be less conflict in Taiwan. There's less social inequality. Same thing within China, where, it would be difficult to completely liberalize China, no matter how good your intentions are, because of the massive wealth gaps between the intercoastal provinces and, say Shanghai and Beijing and Shenzhen. So you would need some sort of redistributive mechanism, which would involve really fundamental transformation to the Chinese political structure. But again, there are different, there's different objectives where, if you take communism at face value, it is a revolutionary party. And until that revolution is accomplished, the party is not going to liberalize with, kind of these policies of glasnost. Yeah. It's just Central European. They get a little grumpy sometimes, I suppose. But the big I mean, but the big thing we're looking at here is again, I don't think comparing a nation of like 1 billion people. I mean, is it 1.3 billion at this point? I think it's 1.3 billion in China to itty bitty Taiwan is a really great idea. I mean, you could probably look at cities like Shanghai, Beijing would be better comparisons between like the tier one cities and like Shenzhen, if we're looking at quality of life metrics. But China did the same thing Taiwan did, where it made like, quality of life was terrible in Taiwan for quite a long time, where it was dealing with cheap textile manufacturing, and then it gradually moved up the value chain to become more economically prosperous. That's just kind of what happened. I but I do think like Taiwan is a sacred cow. It may be 1.4 billion. I can't remember the exact stat, but I do think, this idea that, Taiwan is not currently a country. It's China. It's the Republic of China, People's Republic of China. I am nitpicky on that point.
In terms of freedom and democracy, even higher than the USA. I can attest to this, having lived in both countries, and let me tell you, from government to society, there is no comparison between China and Taiwan. Taiwan is the example of what can happen when you give Chinese people freedom, and the Communist Party of China simply loathes that. Think about it. You have an absolutely beautiful and wealthy society that makes China look horrible. The only real option for China, something that they've told their people since the beginning in 1949, is that their only real option is to take over Taiwan, to incorporate it under Beijing rule, or failing that, wipe it off the map. They scream, they cry, they throw tantrums. Taiwan is ours, they say. And they have live fire drills all around the island of Taiwan in tantrums, hoping that someday Taiwan will be theirs.
It's technically a part of China based on what all these folks agreed to. Democracy doesn't necessarily guarantee political success. One of the larger, from like an industrialization perspective, the subcontinent or the Indian subcontinent, when you look at like a place compared to like the US or Russia, even things like oil, coal, things you really need for rapid industrialization are difficult to come by. And I do think there is a bit more, while there is pollution in India, I don't think India was willing to necessarily completely destroy the country for economic growth. Like when you look at just the the toxic soils in China versus India, it's there still is economic growth, but the big the other issue is a lot of the manufacturing, or a lot of the high-end manufacturing, I think that that's going to continue to migrate over to India. And I do think that in the second half of the, a lot of the economic growth of China was really based on, U.S. geopolitical interests. And there really hasn't been as much FDI into. Oh, I would argue that like Poland was, already industrialized though, and it's not really it's really the kind of industrialization that goes into a country. A lot of the software, a lot of like the raw mineral processing, mining, a lot of chemical manufacturing. These are highly, highly polluting industries. And correct me if I'm wrong here, my general sense is that the Indian authorities have still been more competent about keeping that out, but even the development of Indian industry to a certain extent, because India does play by the rules, has been difficult because while there is, I mean, the Indian Constitution is fascinating. It's just, it's complicated. Um, India is not particularly homogenous. It's not, so India's constitutional structure or constitutional agreement is just complicated. And, when you look at China versus India, China really hasn't been at war in the past like 40 years. I mean, really since the 1980s. Whereas India, I think there's been more conflict with Pakistan. India is really beset by, even still a Maoist insurgency. So there's domestic terror issues. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of problems, whether it be, jihadist groups that really upset India versus China. But I do think it's kind of the investment decision of, would I rather invest in India and China? I'd 100% rather invest in India. And I think as it becomes more of a, economic change, we'll see how it goes. But let's continue with our buddy, Mr. Musk.
There's another reason too. Taiwan makes all the world's chips. Kind of need those to move forward in this day and age. But anyway, the problem is Taiwan doesn't want that, all right? This would be fine. Let's just say hypothetically, hey, Taiwan, all the people in Taiwan, yeah, they live in a free country, but they just really want to be part of China. That'd be great, right? No one would have a problem with that. But the problem with that, Elon Musk, is they don't want to be part of China. You don't get to make that decision for them. Taiwan is a free and unrelated country. The vast majority of people in Taiwan do not want to unify with Beijing, no matter what you may have heard. But China maintains that Taiwan is theirs, and no one can get in the way of that. So here we have.
So I don't want to sound like I'm being contrite here, but the KMT political elite, or even the conservative elite within Taiwan, I mean, it's like, it doesn't really necessarily matter what the vast majority of people want. It's like, and it really depends how you phrase this question. Just coming from a background in political polling, there are ways you could phrase this. If China was a liberal democracy, Taiwan would probably reunify and be part of China, because you get access to the entire Chinese mainland market. If that was a domestic market that was the size of the United States, market access would become more important. Yes, there's a lot of different there's a lot of things that could go into that, but declaring independence for Taiwan is not as simple as just, hey, we're going to be independent. Like Taiwan has pseudo embassies in a lot of countries today, but it still purports itself to be China, which becomes very, very difficult. Now, that is, the best case scenario I see for Taiwan with China would be more of like a European level of agreement, where it's basically like the China Economic Association or something like that. You get free movement of people between China and Taiwan, but Taiwan's not going to want that because of the massive immigration that would come from mainland China. So there are a number of ways to be, there's a number of ways to do something like this, which is basically like, they're a unified country, but they're not. I mean, it would be a more federal system versus the unitary state you see today. So there are ways to do this, but it's not as a special administrative region. It would basically be it would be the state of Taiwan. Taiwan would maintain, probably its own military, like the Taiwanese Defense Force or something like that. Separate treaties, but there would be like, unified trade policy, things like that potentially. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but I do think, radically simplifying the issue here, and it's a messy, there is no good solution here, because even, straight independence is not necessarily what the people in power in Taiwan want to do. So, it is that could be the case, but it doesn't necessarily matter what the Taiwanese people necessarily want. It does matter what the political class has the will to do. And, as long as the KMT is still really contesting power, it seems very unlikely that something like that will happen. But allow us to continue.
We have Elon Musk weighing in on this, telling Taiwanese people that they basically have to roll over and join under the banner of their mortal enemy, with a stale promise that it'll get some sort of autonomy. And that's all fine and dandy to people that don't understand the situation, but you can't tell a people group that don't want to be part of another country, that are already a part of a functioning and flourishing democracy, that they have to do that. By the way, where have we heard this promise before? Hong Kong was promised 50 years of autonomy. Beijing ignored that. Half of the population of Hong Kong took to the streets to show in numbers that they don't want to be part of China. And they don't want to have China encroach on their rights. China is a glorified North Korea with more money. Hong Kong is wealthier than China, it's freer than China, and it's more prosperous and charitable. It is a great society. Beijing tore up that contract and steamrolled all attempts at preserving their territory, and Hong Kong has become a dystopian hellhole under strict surveillance of Beijing. I should know. Thousands of people have told me since 2019 that they in fact had to flee. So Elon Musk, let me make this easy.
Okay, uncomfortable reality of Hong Kong. It's kind of like Cuba. It's like Cuba. To kind of compare it to a country in the American context, it would be like, imagine there was like a communist city, like the most important economic center in your country was basically, used as a center of, kind of dissent or something like that. It's not necessarily a tolerable long-term situation for a country's ruling elite. So it's kind of just waiting for the shoe to drop. With Hong Kong, so there are things, that would be tolerated, but as Hong Kong became less economically important for China, Hong Kong became expendable. the writing was on the wall in 1997. This was foreseeable, but the British government was in no position to maintain control over Hong Kong. That was, fait accompli. There was no winnable position. So again, you run into these situations here where, yeah, I mean, it's the issue is it's yeah, I mean, it really is one of those things where, like, the general consensus would be in our lifetime. I just don't see anything happening here. Taiwan and I would say that if I'm watching the actions of the United States government, the United States is definitely going to be reducing its supply chain's reliance on Taiwan. There's going to be probably a strongly worded letter. But again, Taiwan's independence, like, Taiwan does not really have the ability to resist China, from just like a pure military and population point of view, doesn't have access to nuclear weapons or arms. So Taiwanese independence or independent Taiwan only exists as long as it's politically expedient for the United States. And once, yeah, I mean, it's like, again, I don't think anything with Taiwan will happen in the next 5 years. That really, that seems like a reasonable assumption that for like the next 5 years, nothing's going to happen because of the Russia debacle. It's going to probably start with, true, but where is Taiwan going to test these things? It's also, I believe, part of the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. It would make sense, but it's just, you're getting into a position where, if Taiwan begins to develop nuclear weapons, that becomes politically untenable for the United States, which is a signatory of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and that really does give China a casus belli, or a reason to go to war with Taiwan. There is a certain yeah, I mean, it's like, that would be the reality of the situation. I mean, it could be likely that, if the US was consumed by another, geopolitical situation, like, now that we're not bogged down in Afghanistan anymore, even though that was a massive geopolitical debacle of, the past 2 decades, America's eyes are very keenly focused on the Asia Pacific region. From a geopolitical perspective, Russia has handed Biden a massive, massive political victory because he's forced basically every country in Europe into the arms of the American security apparatus. He's also forcing Turkey in. Huge strategic miscalculation by Russia. Huge, epic strategic miscalculation. So all he's done is essentially play into US strategic interests. So if you're looking at the world geopolitically, the areas where America wants to reassert influence are definitely the Asia Pacific region. And, China doesn't have any good cards to give us from a concession perspective, because access to the Chinese market has become markedly less desirable to American companies, given the supply chain issues and the problem they've had exporting goods. So it's it's a different political game now, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this unfolds. From an investing perspective, I don't see short term disruption to the status quo. Maybe an island seizure, maybe something like that. But even in Russia, the best case scenario there is, it's going to end in the status quo antebellum, which is just before war. Pardon the Latin, but geopolitics just makes me do that. Let's continue though.
There is good and bad in this world. Sometimes it can be that simple. Of course, there are also moral gray zones. But here's the deal. Taiwan is good. It's full of good people with good intentions, a good legal system, a great democracy, and it's doing just fine without living under China's rule. Taiwan doesn't want to be a part of China. China, under its current government, is bad. Not the people, not even the country, but the government that has full reign over that country. And China, taking over Taiwan against its will, is bad.
I don't like the application of the names good and bad. We're not the good and bad channel. We are the world is a messy pile of gray channel, and I think it's dangerous, and it sets us up on a war footing. It puts us on the path of war to say that the government is bad. We're the good guys. And it really opens us up to the danger of war rhetoric, which, again, I am just not a fan of. Which I think the language you need to use with China needs to be very calculated. It needs to be very careful. And I don't like the terminology good and bad. Currently, Taiwan's independence, or Taiwan not being a part of People's Republic of China, is favored by U.S. strategic interests. The only thing that keeps Taiwan independent is American self-interest. That's all. It's the same thing that, somehow we have a very complicated relationship with Israel, but it is effectively, U.S. power that helps underwrite that independence in addition to the ability to defend it. But, like Ukraine, the reason Russia could act was because Ukraine was outside of the security guarantees of the United States. And Russia wanted to prove that it was, I'm out of tea. It's very sad. I had a lovely gunpowder tea from China. I mean, I really want to do the 7, the imperial teas. Been on a little bit of a tea bender lately. So I do really hope my tea supply does not get disrupted by all this. Taiwanese tea is also excellent as well if you need a nice oolong tea. India tea is good as well, with the Darjeeling region, and the Assam blacks are lovely as well. Kind of a caffeine guy, as probably everybody on this channel knows. But with what Matt is saying, I think we get into an extremely dangerous footing where we're saying China is evil, and that begins to produce a lot of potential, speculative investment opportunities. With TSMC, I'd be very bearish at the moment, because I think a lot of that capability or fabrication would be moved over to the United States, or the United States will begin to onshore a lot more of that capacity. So again, the situation is going to be a very, very messy one, no matter what. And Musk's comments really do reinforce that.
It doesn't matter whatever ridiculous arrangement that you've come up with, Taiwan doesn't want to be a part of China. This fake gray zone that Elon has created preys on people's emotions. Because what it does is it says, oh, in order to avoid all of these unnecessary deaths, we have to come to the realization that China's going to take over Taiwan anyway, so why not try to come up with a nice, peaceful solution ahead of time? This is really dangerous because it's actually an unreasonable and unrealistic solution to a problem. China has shown that it will steamroll and strip the rights of every single citizen away. This idea that, hey, it's gonna happen anyway, so let's just give up. Giving up is better than dying, right? This argument relies on believing that China would even give any amount of autonomy to Taiwan.
So the problem is, and I do think this just bears being said is I don't think it makes sense to say, it just doesn't make sense to say these things. There are a lot of issues we run into, and what I would, where I want to go here is I just don't think we're dealing with a situation where we actually have an environment where it's like Elon is being unreasonable. I mean, the peaceful solution for us in America is that Taiwan becomes a special administrative region of China. That is the no war solution. Will the people of Taiwan arguably have a worse quality of life? Yes. Yes, they will. But the purely naked American self-interest of going to war for a godforsaken island in the Pacific, it's not really there. Like, we don't need to do that. And, that projection of power is not necessarily one that favors, U.S. geopolitical interest. I mean, we would probably apply sanctions. We would really give them a stern, we'd send them a very strongly worded letter, I'm sure. But it's not Poland in 1939. It's not the, it's not the bridge that, again, really favors U.S. strategic interests here. So I think what Matt's position is, you get into this really, he's become a real, China hawk. And, you have to just be brutally honest where what is the position here, with the China hawk. China has drawn a red line where Taiwanese independence means war. So, are we going to war for Taiwan? Is that something America is going to do? Is that a wise course of action? Is that a good way to spend American lives? No. And I've been very consistent on this position where, I'm not anti-war, but I'm definitely skeptical, and I don't see a, but again, what keeps what keeps Taiwan free, what allows for this Taiwanese economic miracle, is the strength of American arms. And, we derive benefits from being the world's global policeman, but let's not kid ourselves about why Taiwan is still free. Now, as long as that US security guarantee is there, and as long as China is afraid of a military conflict with the United States, which it should be, we have a stable situation. Unless something external comes along and disrupts that, disrupts that balance. But I don't think this is an especially radical position, but, I find Matt's, idealism here to be somewhat quaint, but we are really fundamentally talking about, if we're going to go to the mats and, let's make Taiwan independent, the status quo is a lot better than anything that Matt is advocating. The status quo makes the most sense. There should be no changes to the status quo. I am on the hashtag no changes plan when it comes to China and Taiwan. So this fiction where it's neither independent or, dependent on China, that is the best scenario. An armed conflict over Taiwan serves no one's interest. So, maybe an independent Taiwan makes sense if that can be done peacefully, but it will result in, at least if the Chinese government is to be believed, it will result in armed conflict. So this is the status quo. The status quo does not get you clicks on YouTube, but hashtag no changes for Taiwan, it makes the most sense. And I don't think that position is... China keeps undermining Taiwan. China keeps testing Taiwan. China's not stress testing Taiwan. China is stress testing the United States. It's also making a show for the domestic market. Now, the United States needs to maintain a willingness. It can never be said by the U.S. administration it will not go to war over Taiwan. That option always needs to be on the table. But again, it's the status quo where it's okay, China saber rattles a little bit and then it just goes back and it just doesn't matter. I still contend that that's the best case scenario here. The status quo, China keeps probing Taiwan to see what it can get away with. Because if China can take Taiwan, just occupy it with, just a slap on the wrist by the United States, they'll do that. I mean, they would do that in boom, a heartbeat, and it would be a massive political victory for the Chinese Communist Party because it's a stated objective they've had for going on 70 years. And so that would be something they would swoop in and execute in 2 minutes. But for right now, the actual status quo is the... Oh, I'm getting coffee, guys. Thank you. The coffee gods have been kind to us with more skepticism fueled. But I do think it's just the status quo is just better for right now. So to Matt's extent, we should prevent China from changing the status quo. I agree with Matt. To force through Taiwanese independence, I don't think that's a good idea. And I just think that's the better political move. right now.
Have they done it to Hong Kong? Despite the promises from Beijing, they stormed in, stopped the protests, and turned Hong Kong into the dystopian police state that it is today. Why would anyone believe China under its current leadership? They've gone back on their word on nearly every agreement they've ever come up with. So why is Elon doing this? Because in his mind, Elon needs China. He needs a place to build his cars, and he wants access to the biggest market in the world. You know how to tell it's really bad? Chinese state media praised Elon's proposal. They loved it. It's exactly what they've been trying to say. And with an influential voice like his, millions around the world may have just fallen for the
Welcome.
Chinese government's narrative. They've fallen into the fold of Beijing's influence, neglecting 24 million people in Taiwan.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree with that too. With that's yeah, it's his bread and butter, but I mean, mine is it's like the audience is like save Taiwan, save Taiwan, save Taiwan, and I'm just kind of like I'm just the American here going like I'm like we're gonna do nothing. Because if there is a truly American position about something, it's do nothing. It's do absolutely nothing until the situation becomes totally untenable. But right now, both sides are, stating their stated objective of both governments. Their official position is the inevitable reunification of China. So I think it would be better if that's a peaceful reunification. But that's currently the stated objective. But I'm just an American investor trying to make a little bit of money. To be entirely transparent, and Musk's position is that of somebody who wants to do business in China. Because like nothing I have said here is, I'm not being I'm not advocating the downfall of the Chinese state. I am just simply saying that as an American, to the extent my interests are involved, I personally would not want to get involved in what is a Chinese domestic matter. But, again, if we're going to do something for right now for both the people in Taiwan, for people in China, the status quo is the way to go. If we could inch towards Taiwanese independence, where gradually Taiwan became an independent state where its waterways were demilitarized, that might make more sense. But it is a more, it is a very complicated situation. And I think that a lot of it, with Musk, if you're trying to do business in China, you can't really call Taiwan an independent state. And for right now, Taiwan is not independent. So there's two things that I think really matter here, about this conflict in particular, which is going to be the de jure versus de facto independence. I know it's pretty epic. We're getting back with the live stream where we're going back to basics here. Like the credit card content, while interesting, is just not as much fun as the geopolitical stuff. But it's like I'm probably going to do a video on Taiwanese independence, why Taiwanese independence is a really bad idea. Just as we're chatting here, I just think the status quo is really the most, it's de facto independent. So, the two terms, like what matters here is like de facto and de jure. So de facto is like in reality, and de jure is by law. So by law, Taiwan could be part of the People's Republic of China. We could have a legal fiction that keeps everybody happy, but Taiwan maintains de facto independence by having a military and a U.S. military security guarantee. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm just on the anti-war train. I got way too many family who are veterans. I know too many people who've gotten disabilities in foreign wars, and we just really don't have anything to show for it for nearly 20 years of war. Like, just look at Afghanistan, where, we fought there for 20 years. Women's rights have virtually gone away. And, we spent all that blood and treasure, and it's basically just pretty much status quo antebellum. Where there really was nothing lasting that changed. And I just don't understand why we would go back to that. But let us continue. But Taiwan declares independence. That changes the game. So, the status quo is de facto independence. De jure independence or legal independence, I don't see that making any sense for any party right now. Yes, it might feel good for Taiwan, but it's kind of like Catalonian independence, where you're like going like, why? Why? Just why? I know it seems really important to not be part of Spain, but just why? And these nationalist causes really eat up a lot of people's energy and time. And again, skeptic here going like, why do you want to spend your life fighting for what is like a non-existent cause, or it's a legal fiction? Countries are legal fictions. They're basically just made up, given meaning by people. But again, I don't see the... Let us continue.
A free and sovereign nation. You know what the problem is, though? The insanity doesn't stop there. Elon has also been praising the fact, sit down for this one, guys, that China has a state-owned app that controls everyone's lives. You don't believe me? Listen to this.
We don't even have an app that's as good as WeChat in China. And like in China, you can like live on WeChat basically. It's like, yeah, everyone's like, like you live on WeChat, you do payments, you do everything. It's like, yeah, it's great. Basically, WeChat's kick ass. And we don't have anything like WeChat outside of China. So I was like, my idea would be like, how about if we just copy WeChat? Hey, copy them.
Buys Twitter, copies WeChat.
Yeah, pretty much.
The thing with WeChat is it's basically in a monopoly position. It's kind of funny to hear Elon Musk, say that it's great to be a monopoly. It's fantastic to be the monopolist. It really is great. I mean, I do think you're bringing up an interesting point, Journey. I just think it's, I just kind of go back to like, Washington's point of view of entangling friendship with all, entangling alliances with none. And when you're looking at China, when you're looking at Russia, these conflicts really just don't put the US really far ahead. I mean, in the Middle East with the price of oil, you could convince me that that really does matter. Like securing those US interests really does matter to America. But, there's like this fundamentalism that really pervades a lot of stuff. Like, the point I wanted to make about Elon Oh, by the way, I should harp the channel Discord, guys. If you enjoy Skeptic Sunday, you're looking for a little bit of a skeptic space, you should totally join the channel Discord. It's a good space. I'm trying to promote a little bit of skepticism here. It's good for everybody. It's good for staying involved. So it's definitely one of those things where a lot of the content that people are putting out though on China is basically, it's really hawkish on China, and I'm just like, okay, if we're gonna go to war, let's have a really good reason to do this. Let's have a very well established. Dude, it's tiny. It's like I'm working on it, man. I'm working on it because I got the I've got the I've got the I'm just taking the channel back to skepticism with kind of some wide ranging, like geopolitical issues. But just with, I think that the point I would really care about here is, dude, it's tiny, man. It's tiny. I'm just kind of getting back into the YouTube game after like, a whole year. I mean, this is just our third I think this is just our third Skeptic Sunday we've actually done. I do have Dr. Wharton coming next weekend. For those of you who remember Jonathan Wharton, we did a live stream on the UK and China. So we're gonna probably revisit Taiwan a little bit. He's an associate dean at the University of Southern Connecticut. Really smart guy. Does a lot of work on like transportation policy as well. So we'll kind of get into Elon Musk, I think, a little bit more as well. But the big thing for me is I think I'm looking for a casus belli, and my political positions are, I think we need to have a really well established reason. Thank you, sir. It's like restarting from somewhere, because like we used to have like 10 people on the stream, and then I met my girlfriend, and I suddenly was driving to New York every weekend, so didn't have as much time for Skeptic Sunday. But now bought a house, and she supports the live stream. She's also my coffee crew, very important. So we're back. But I do think, with Taiwan, I'm really looking for a casus belli where JD is sporadically in the background. He is, if my memory kicking in here, he is, he's on sporadically. This time doesn't work for him because remember, we were usually doing like, I'd start at 8 a.m. and starting at 8 a.m. is good on Sundays because it still lets us get everybody who's in like Australia and stuff, or even in China. Haza got out of YouTube because people were just being like total potato heads. And I do call Winston and Matt the green screen grifters, where it's kind of like this, let's go to war, let's get amped up, let's get hawkish. And I'm like, no. And if you're wondering where Leo, the Spanish water dog, is, he is chilling under my feet right now, and he's having a good time. Speaking of the old crew, I also have a cat now. So the cat sometimes might make an experience, might intrude, but now the door is shut. But yeah, it's just chatting Haza the other day. Like he's out of YouTube, because you can imagine just being like, hey, like I'm neutral. Like that annoys people. That really annoys people. I mean, skepticism just makes people's blood boil. I mean, the position I'm saying about Taiwan, where if Taiwan declares independence, like that changes the whole game. So the status quo is in regards to like Taiwan, the best possible outcome. Exactly. I mean, the world is full. My dad would start every day with me with the phrase, what do we believe in? Excellence. What is excellence? Doing your very best. What will other people try to do? They'll try to make you feel bad in order to make themselves feel good. And that's just really something people do. They just kind of like to make people feel bad. Yeah, I don't wish anything ill on Matt and Winston's family. I hope they're both getting over their health issues and that they're doing okay and that they're going to be successful. I just think on the subject of Taiwan, I think the best case for Taiwan right now is just, it keeps its de facto independence. But if that situation changes, as the circumstances change, we're going to obviously need to reevaluate things. But for right now, I think that status quo is probably, it's going to probably be best for, it's going to definitely probably be best for our friends in Taiwan as well as people in, young people in China, because I just don't see a reason why we'd want to go to war, why we'd want to be involved in that, because war is a really, it's a really terrible thing. I think the situation in Ukraine and Afghanistan can only really enforce that. And if there is a legitimate cause for revolution, if the facts and evidence demand that, I think then that's what should be advocated for, because that's the right thing to do. But right now, there's not really a because we don't need to declare wars anymore, because everything is a security action, and we haven't declared war in nearly the United States has not officially declared war in over since World War II. Everything has been a policing action. Exactly. I mean, but the thing though is, like, dictatorships suck, but are we gonna actually be able to overthrow overthrowing dictatorships, when an outside power overthrows a dictator, that doesn't necessarily make us appear to be the liberator. Where, yes, there was, if you look at the wars we've waged with dictators, it gets really difficult. I mean, there are areas where, there could be a morally justifiable situation, but, again, going to war, if you're a ruler, if you're looking at these things, it gets very, very complicated. So there's no easy, there's no easy solution here. And I think that, I think that George Soros is right, with his positions on like having an open society, building open societies. I just think it's, I think it's a good position to just speak softly and carry a big stick. Like, personally, if I lived in Taiwan, I would advocate being armed to the teeth. Would be my position.
Yes.
Listen, I lived in China for 10 years, and yes, WeChat, the all-encompassing app, the app that does everything for everyone in China, does in fact make life more convenient at the expense of everything. I'm not even talking about those people that are like, I don't care if this website tracks me. I have nothing to hide. Who cares if the government's looking at me?
Yeah, I mean, well, if they want to eat my lunch, I'm extremely competitive, and we'll have a competition, and it'll be fair. But I don't think there's anything right now where the U.S. has a legitimate casus belli Americans are Americans are extremely competitive. I don't like Europe very much because they don't like competing. There is something about the thrill of competition that is exciting. Um, I mean, I do think we should economically crush China. That is not a, it's, yeah, well, America historically and the UK don't play fair either. So it's, but again, I do think, you fight fire with fire and you have a realistic perspective on these things. I mean, acting as if, these guys are our friend, like our best buddies, is incredibly foolish. Um, I think the best cases were frenemies or friends who are enemies, or that might be a new one for everybody not in the US, where it's that idiom where it's frenemies. And that's our best case scenario with China. I think maintaining a civil dialogue, but again, speak softly and carry a big stick. I still don't see, like the casus belli, like, I got in trouble because I was like, okay, the bonds because like the China Railroad bond scam, where I was really skeptical about that. And, it's one of those things where those bonds are like completely, dude, the American political class, like oh, that's its own that's like its own video of just like the American. I mean, here's the thing. It's like Americans kind of live in La La Land. So there's two basic, I do want to I want to close out this video and then maybe we could go on to something else. So let's just finish up here. But there's two kind of big lies that dominate American politics as far as I'm concerned, or even American economics. There's kind of this market fundamentalism, which is markets work, markets are good, and, markets don't fail, when it's kind of pretty damn obvious that markets fail. I mean, if you look at, the housing crisis, if you look at right now, where there's this hyperinflation, it's pretty obvious that, like, when you shut down the entire market, COVID-19 is, not going to work. Like, so all the old rules are gone. And, with George Soros, like when it comes to the economy, like right now we're living in revolutionary times, and the old rules or the old way of doing things, don't begin to make a lot of sense. So, I go always back to probably my favorite book on economics, which is The Alchemy of Finance, with Soros, where in order to survive, you need to constantly be ready to adapt. And, with the American political establishment, we're still having the same fights we were having 20 years ago, whether that be, Roe v. Wade, socialism is bad, and we just have these very simplistic arguments where like now we're like video games, or like 20 years ago it was video games, now it's social media. We're having fundamentally the same, silly arguments we've always had, and that is an American specialty as well. Again, let's go back to my favorite pseudo Winston Churchill quote. You can rely on the Americans to do the right thing after they have tried everything else. So that is what the American political class has done with China. And we have arrived at the point where with China, we have tried to be their friend, we've tried bribing them, we've tried waiting, and now we're kind of like, okay, these are not our buddies. This is the new Soviet Union. And you see a lot of problems. There are places in the economy, though, where socialism makes sense, or you need socialist competition. So there is like hospitals and train, like passenger rail, are not particularly great. examples of a market. But let's also, I do just want to point this out with WeChat. I'm just like, okay, so WeChat is basically an internet browser for your phone. Like, because you scan a QR code and it takes you. God does love the United States. God bless America. But it's one of those things where, I've lived in other countries and I still infinitely prefer America, warts and all. I know I have like this really, yeah, well, the thing is, it's like Americans complain about cheating, but Americans cheat too. It's kind of human nature. But I don't like living in, like the land of like pseudo accusations and lack of evidence. But like I have WeChat and I have WeChat installed on my phone, so I guess I'm getting spied on all the time, right? And I think my big question here is, what is the difference between an internet browser and WeChat? I can do all the things WeChat lets me do with an internet browser. Like, oh gasp, I've got to switch between two apps on my smartphone. Humanity. Well, it's just like there are certain there's certain areas where it's like, I mean, any idealist system, like if you look at markets and basically if you look at markets and you look at if you look at markets in particular, they require an outside actor to be stable, like even human nature, where you think about like just all the stupid stuff humans do. Like, I really hope there is a God. I'm very skeptical on these things, but I really hope there is one, because if you think about all the systems we design, like, you just need a frying pan to the head sometimes to reset things and keep things on balance, because everything humans do, we're kind of like goblins in either World of Warcraft or in Warhammer Fantasy, where everything we do flows up. Because we're like, it's cool, and let's do it, and we end up with a lot
I
of
don't
these
care
issues.
about that kind of stuff. Listen, on WeChat, which you're pretty much mandated to have in China, or else you can't do anything, everything you do, you say, you join, or pay for, literally everything is tracked and monitored by the government. Every picture, every conversation, every phone call. You can say whatever you want about every country has access to that kind of stuff if they really want to. No. If you have the tiniest little dissenting opinion and you share that over chat or phone,
That looks
on
kind of
WeChat,
creepy.
you're done. They nab people for mild criticism, for mouse sakes. One dude made fun of a traffic cop, and he got strapped to a tiger chair and had to make forced confessions. This
tiger
app
chair?
that Elon praises is the very mechanism that keeps Chinese
A
people in
tiger
the
chair.
dark and cuts them off from the world in their own ecosystem mandated by the Chinese.
Yes, I mean, the thing is with WeChat, I mean, like, Elon Musk wants to put chips in your brains and control, like, it's like, that's a good idea. Like, we should all have chips in our brains. I'm like, no. I think probably the funniest and, most ridiculous collapse and, just so, working in market research, like when you think you're going to have a product that comes to market, if you look at the computer revolution, central planners or even IBM or even the people producing the supercomputers only thought they would be used by the government. They didn't think businesses would use computers. And you just look at that today and you're like, oh my God, that's so silly. Given the prevalence and need of businesses for computational power. And that's really where these things were adopted. So the ways people use technology are not clean and predictable. And they really drive a lot of changes. But a tiger chair, that's interesting. you know, like with the public shaming and stuff and all these wonderful things. Yeah, it's just like, eh. But again, it's a, you know, there's definitely a lot of things here, you know, but it always comes back
government
to
and
like
keeps
WeChat.
them under a watchful eye of one of the most brutal dictatorships the world has ever seen. Bro, China has made it very clear that you aren't getting Starlink anywhere near it. Starlink is Elon Musk's answer to free and open internet for everyone around the world. And
Starlink is like the stupidest idea Elon Musk has ever had because he needs to launch like 42,000 satellites. And we actually need to be very careful about the amount of stuff we put in space. That way we don't end up stuck on planet Earth because there's like a blackout effect. Elon Musk just says stuff that he thinks is good. The man is not actually the richest man in the world. You know, it's like when people call him the world's wealthiest man, the world's richest man, you know, that implies to me that you own assets that have intrinsic value rather than speculative value. The only reason his assets have any value is because, oh golly jeebers, I think that's super valuable because it's the future. So like I was going to do another video criticizing Kathy Wood, who is, you know, talks about like the you know, speculative, you know, investment or creative invention, and it's like you can't predict what innovation is going to be earth shattering. I mean, they're like, guess what, the Romans nearly invented steam power, but guess what, they didn't use it because it was cheaper to use slave labor. You know, so the Greeks were really close to steam power. So, you know, there is history where basically, you know, like Japan is a great example where they had guns and then they got rid of guns and they actually made improvements on European firearms because, you know, there was societal pressure and there was culture. So a lot of these innovations can fail to take hold and it's always interesting. But WeChat is basically like a government mandated mobile internet browser. I fail to understand what is so revolutionary about that. The answer is it seems to be nothing. Controversial position.
people ask me every single day. I swear I get bombarded with questions asking me what's going to happen to the future of freedom of speech in China when Starlink is everywhere. When Elon has Starlink in China, everyone will be able to communicate and there's no more Great Firewall, no more censorship. The Chinese government can't do anything about it.
If you're waiting for Elon Musk to save you, and if you're waiting for anyone to save you, you have serious problems in your life and you need to start taking responsibility for yourself. Then what is an internet browser? I mean, the internet is basically an everything app. I'm like, ooh, how magical. I mean, so basically it's an operating system within an operating system. Like, okay. So I have single log on through Google. Woo! You know, if it was so much better. Yeah, just like I have an internet browser or I have an internet connection. I think that would be my big thing. But I digress here.
About it due to the nature of the technology. This is absurd fantasy. If you think that the Chinese government is going to roll over and allow their citizens to access unfettered internet with Starlink, if you think they're going to allow that to proliferate, it doesn't matter what fantasy you've created about how Starlink works. If you believe all this stuff, you'd be better off turning off real life and chilling with Zuck in the metaverse.
Do you have a favorite feature to use in here?
Yeah.
Something that you think is very cool?
Check this out.
I will definitely say that really this just reminds me of Second Life, and this looks so horribly tacky, the metaverse. I don't get it. It's just like the guys who advocate crypto. Like, dude, the transaction fees are just so high. I'm like, why? Why are we doing this, guys? Just why? And you know, I get flamed, but I'm still going like, why? Why is that? Sir? Sir, that is what I use my internet browser for. I do all of those wonderful things. Like, I use my phone and I just have to click between two things. So, I mean, it's like, I'm just like, it's just totally creepy. But, I mean, here's the thing though, like, it's used for payments, it's used for communication, like, it's used for investing and money transfer. Like, I get in trouble here because I'm just like, well, that's magical. Like, that is magical. I am, I'm just like, I'm like, that is magical. That's what I use my phone for. I do all of these things on my phone. And I don't have the government monitoring every single thing I do in every single app. WeChat. It's like, but that, like, people are like, oh, WeChat. You gotta try WeChat, man. I'm just like, what? I mean, there's certain things like in Spain that are better, where like there's the Certificado Digital, which is like your ID, where you have like an ID card and it has like an RFID chip on it. And it like makes it so you can use like this digital certificate. Like, that is cool. Like the national ID system or like things like that, which Americans just ain't gonna go for. But let's look at the sad little world.
This is so freaking cool.
By the way, can we never forget that Zuck asked Xi Jinping to name his child? What is it with these billionaires and dictator worship?
I still don't get it.
wonder. Elon, China doesn't want you, bro. They stage fake protests to say your cars catch on fire and that the brakes fail. And then they ban your cars in certain areas at certain times. Here's the real deal. I'm about as free speech as it gets, but I'm also very averse to attributing huge successes and achievements to one single person, especially when it elevates them to positions where millions of people follow them blindly every single day.
I agree. We're promoting skepticism
No
together,
man
Matt.
with billions of dollars should have that much power. The power to
Don't
sway the
worry.
markets
We'll
with
be
a
back,
tweet,
I'm saying,
the
next
power to
weekend,
influence major
October
global decisions,
23rd.
but most of all,
Dr. Wharton
the
will be in the
power
house.
to wade into global conflict and diplomacy. Especially when there's 24 million people in Taiwan that don't get a say, when it's overshadowed by somebody that tells them to roll over.
I know,
and
it's like-
listen to Beijing. I really want to believe that Elon Musk has people's best interests in mind.
The only guy Elon Musk cares about is Elon Musk. You know, this idea that somehow, you know, just being a rich, you know, Elon Musk was a reprehensible human being. There was no moral good about him, and then he accumulated this amount of money, and somehow having a lot of money makes you a good person, or, you know, at least gives you enough money for PR. But even then, like, Elon Musk's PR is not that great. You know, so he's done a couple of things. You know, he didn't really do X.com, you know, with PayPal. That was Peter Thiel, not Elon Musk. You know, and both of these guys are not the world's most savory characters. And again, this, like, I want to say, like, the sacralization or the making sacred of wealth. You know, instead of like reasoning, instead of like debate skill, instead of really like the power of persuasion, you know, really does cheapen, you know, really does cheapen our world, because, you know, there originally, like, poverty was a, you know, was a, you know, it's a virtue of the gospel, is, you know, to be poor is to be humble, and humility has historically always been a, you know, it's always been a virtue. So, like, being a rich man does not make you a good man. I still kind of contend, if we go all biblical on it, it's much harder to be a good man with a lot of money than it is to be a good man with a modest amount of money. But, it ends up being where, I think that my tone on Matt is pretty, non-controversial, it's skeptical. I do agree with Matt, you shouldn't just be blindly following Elon Musk. You just should not be doing that, but by the same token, you shouldn't be just following an influencer like Matt or, like Matt or Winston. I do need to look at some more of their recent content because I feel like a lot of the quote unquote, green screen grift has been caused by, some of their health issues. And, I do wish them the best. I hope they make a healthy recovery. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not saying they're bad guys. I just think that, again, with the situation of Taiwan, best outcome for everybody is the status quo. From an investing perspective, personally, I wouldn't be, investing or making any bets over the near term in China. I think there's more, speculative amounts of money to be made off like Russia breaking. I think a further break between Russia and India is likely based on US political moves. But again, we'll really see how that goes. I just really think that, the kind of content we're producing here, at least on Skeptic Sunday, is again really aimed at, just looking at the status quo and just maintaining a degree of skepticism about these things. And I do think it results in, better decision making and outcomes. But let's see. So we got 3 minutes left scheduled, guys, because I do this from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Join the Discord community. That's always good. October 23rd, we've got Dr. Wharton joining. I'm going to be trying to get more interview content set up. Again, looking at questions around global politics and international living, to continue working on some of the channel topics. And then I'm continuing with my financial content. It just doesn't work super well. I tried credit card content, and credit card content is not my it's not my forte. It's very obvious I don't care. Is kind of what I've realized. So we'll stick at it, though. We're gonna definitely stick at it. Hopefully this was at least somewhat informative. I mean, hey, you want to go live? You can always join us here on. I'm always looking for guests. That is kind of the next. That's kind of the next step. So I do just want to actually finish this video. I feel very strongly about this.
He's a person that millions of people follow and emulate and look up to, but I'm really having a hard time believing that right now.
Shouldn't emulate someone just because they have money. Probably the end of October, we're going to do one of my personal favorites I've been meaning to dive into. Andrew Tate. Oh, Mr. Andrew Tate. I have been looking forward to an Andrew Tate skepticism for quite some time. I mean, I have been looking forward to this. I have really been looking forward to this. Mr. Tate is a special character. He is a special character. Who I'm really looking forward to diving into a little bit more. But again, this idea that somehow I'm definitely making a video on the hypnosis guy, like how to hypnotize yourself to make $250,000 a week. I cannot resist that one. I just can't resist. Yeah, I mean, Tate is like my, like, the Manosphere. The Manosphere is one of my personal favorite. Like what the hell are you guys doing? It's it's like who hurt you, bro? It's like who hurt you? Um, but that is pretty much. I also love. I've got my like new little like button thing. I got an Elgato Stream Deck for myself, and it's like so much fun just doing this. Just like I love pressing the button like that. It is great. So guys, thank you so much for joining Skeptic Sunday. I really appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. I have to go roast some coffee, and we'll be back online next Sunday. Thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. And oh my God, they're so ridiculous. They're so ridiculous. I'm just like, what are you doing, silly sillies? Oh, you silly sillies. But thanks so much, guys, and have a great weekend, okay?